Can the iPhone 4 on iOS 6 be used today in 2018 as a daily driver? All right. So, anyway, I'm going to try to start off with the positives first, get those out of the way, and then I'm going to talk about some things that I wasn't able to sadly achieve on this phone using it as a daily driver versus my actual phone that I use every day, my Moto X. So here's some things that I found were actually really good about this device, using it for the day that I decided to use this phone. So one of the things that I found really good was the actual size of the phone. You know, with a 3.5-inch display, it's very easy to touch all four corners of the actual screen, which as a result makes the usability really easy, especially if you got like a lot of things in your hands, you're sort of multitasking a lot. It's really nice to be able to just go in, you know, to touch in the messages app, and you know send a quick text message, especially if you're in a rush or you're just really busy. So yeah, I really do like the small screen. Another thing that I really do like is the actual user interface itself. You know, there's a reason I actually downgraded this to iOS 6 using the Geek Grade downgrade. And even though it's tethered, I definitely think it's certainly worth it. You certainly get a bit more usability out of this device. You know, going into things like settings, you know, going into music and everything like that. You notice that the animations are really fluid. And that's something that I kind of really like about iOS 6. Just kind of going into just like sort of the general performance of it is really good, at least when it comes to the stock apps. Third-party apps is something I'm going to get into in a little bit, and that's something that isn't necessarily as solid. But overall, when it comes to the stock apps and just like the general look of all the apps and sort of like the realism that's in there, it kind of just makes the whole user interface just feel a lot more classic, I guess, because you know really after the Steve Jobs era, you know, this kind of stuff like wasn't around in iOS, you know, with the flat design from iOS 7 and onwards, and even in Android with Android Lollipop and onwards, you know, sort of like the realism in software seems to be something that disappeared. So it's nice to see something like this because, to be honest, it's actually a really rare thing to see. So yeah, so those are the things that I like. So one of the first things is the actual performance of the device. And like I said before, you know, going into like stock apps like this, like messages or like, you know, music, you know, you're not going to have a problem with those because those are sort of Apple's own baked in apps. The ones that I'm talking about that kind of give you a problem are stuff like Twitter. So if I go into Twitter real quick, you know, I just want to go right in and I just want to scroll, see what I got on my feed. But you can see the UI is unresponsive for at least a good like 10 seconds or so. And even then when you're scrolling, you know, it's really, really laggy. You know, I really have to scroll like several times. And even then, when you're trying to like, you know, load the different pictures or everything like that, you know, it's kind of like really hard to really enjoy yourself when you're using this app. Especially when you want to see all the images or, you know, things people may have liked or stuff like that. You can't really do that because, you know, this phone's age, I mean, this phone is almost like 8 years old. So it's understandable, but still, it's something that I found myself not being able to do as fluidly versus something like my Moto X. So, you know, the same thing applies for Instagram, Facebook, Facebook Messenger, yada yada. So the performance of third-party apps, at least the ones that kind of like have like a feed or whatever, like those seem to be like not very good. When it came to the Google apps, that was kind of a hit and miss for me. In terms of Gmail, you know, I was able to get into all my Google accounts, all my email, which is really nice. Something I found with Drive, which I thought was a little interesting, is that I can't actually view any of the things that are actually on my Google Drive account. I'm thinking it might be because I didn't add anything, but still, I think you should still be able to see something. So I might be broken on iOS 6, or maybe not supported anymore. I'm not really sure what's going on there. In terms of Google Maps, it still works, you know, just as it would on any modern phone. The only problem with this is, of course, due to the iPhone 4's hardware, you can't get turn-by-turn directions, which for me, you know, when I'm going to school or going to work, or maybe just going to someplace new, that's like really important for me to like, which lane to exit, which lane to turn. If you don't really kind of have that kind of stuff, it just kind of makes it like really hard, kind of difficult for me to use and just get used to, really. When it comes to Google Chrome, this one was actually pretty good. I am still very happy that iOS still supports Google Chrome. And one of the reasons that is because of their ability to, like Google Chrome's ability to like remember passwords, remember user information and stuff like that. Because a lot of it I can find myself forgetting at times, and it's really nice just going to Google Chrome and being able to see all that. In terms of games, Temple Run, ran fine. It's a pretty old game, so I wouldn't expect it to lag on here. Smash Hit ran fairly well. Actually, I'll open it right now. But for in terms of Smash Hit, it does like all right, and I have on the lowest graphics setting. But even then, it can be a little laggy. But it's not unplayable or anything like that. But it is definitely noticeably slower than what you would see on like newer phones and everything like that. So I'm just going to wait for it to load right here, and then I'm just going to resume. And as you can see, you can clearly play the game. The frame rates are about, I don't know, 25, 30, 28, 30. It's not bad though. So yeah, there's that. In terms of the other apps, Amazon worked out okay with just sort of like the shipping information and when you're going to get your delivery and stuff wasn't exactly all that solid. I didn't really get anything. I don't think I really got any notifications actually from that. As far as like, yeah, I didn't get any notifications, which is kind of weird because I get that on my Moto X. So that's really like a nice thing to have, but you don't get it on here because probably it's a very old version of the app. When it came to Yahoo Weather, I kind of used this. Actually, I almost tried to actually download Telecast, which was like an older version of the actual like Storm, which is like a newer version of the weather app. But then when I tried to do it on here, Telecast didn't work, so I had to use Yahoo Weather instead. And this one's fairly okay. I mean, the radar doesn't seem to work, but you can still get like hourly and daily forecasts and stuff like that. As you can see, it's very slow though. So when you try to like do anything with it, it's very unresponsive. So yeah, now I'm going to talk about some things that I found that were lacking, and it really isn't because not so much of it's an old phone, and some of these things more of it has to do with Android versus iOS. So if I actually bring my Moto X here into the frame, and some of the things that I noticed about when I looked at my Moto X versus the iPhone 4 are some things that are actually quite important to me that I use on a daily basis. So if I swipe over here to the left, you get spotlight search on the iPhone, but when you're actually looking toward stuff, like when you're trying to get news or like traffic details to your work or your school or stuff like that, or seeing when like a package is going to be shipped or anything like that, it's really helpful to have it right here. Now, granted, you could probably also get this information by, like, for example, like seeing that this book that's coming to my house. I could easily, go into Gmail and I could see like, oh, okay, this book's coming. So I don't really need to like necessarily, I can just get it that way. I don't really need to have it right here, but it's very, very convenient. And this takes like a second. You just like swipe over to the left and you can see all your important information. Whereas on this iOS 6 iPhone 4, you have to go into an app to get sort of like the same things that you are looking for. Now, granted, if you actually look at iOS today, you look at iOS today, you kind of swipe all the way over to the left. You do have that now. You have, I think, really ever since iOS 9, you could add like all these different types of widgets. Like you get the weather, you can get your battery life, you can get stuff again like travel times, which I could get on my Moto X. And you can get my, traffic and all those kind of stuff. So now on iOS, it's not so much a big deal. More has to do with the fact that the iPhone 4 is like, and iOS 6 in general, is just really old. Now the next few things I'm talking about are kind of specifically Moto X features that aren't on this iPhone 4. So one of the things that I like to have in my Moto X is actually, I just see it right there. You can just wave your hand over, and it'll give you like information like the time, you know, notifications and everything like that. On the iPhone 4, you don't get that. Now on the newer iPhones, you do kind of get it with where you can actually raise your phone, and the screen will turn on, and it'll be able to display stuff. But at least when it comes to an older iPhone, you can't do that. Something else that I kind of like about the Moto X are sort of like the gestures you can do. So you can actually double twist. See if I can get to work. Yeah, to launch the camera and take a quick photo, which is very convenient. You can even double chop, and you can get a little flashlight right there. So these are kind of like useful gestures you can kind of do on the phone that kind of makes like things like, like looking at your notifications with like this pulse, or like, taking a quick photo. It just kind of makes the process a little bit easier. And of course, you don't really get any of that kind of stuff on the iPhone 4 because obviously it's a really old phone. And there's even like cool things where you can do where you can actually activate the phone without even having to like unlock the phone or interact with that at all. You just got to use your voice. So I believe my call phrase is, "Okay, Moto, what is the weather like outside?"
Stay airtight. It's 40 degrees and sunny in Reisterstown.
Which is kind of a really cool thing. It's kind of like having Alexa on your on sort of like your phone, but pretty much, yeah, like having like a hands-free assistant is like a really handy thing to have on the phone. There's also like a couple of other minor things that I found myself, not being able to enjoy. Like when it comes to like front firing stereo speakers, I kind of found myself, like if you look at something on the Moto X, it's very loud and stereoscopic, which is really nice. But if you go ahead and get something on the iPhone 4, I get Spotify to load, and go all the way in here into Spotify, and then you can see that when you play it, so pretty much the sound is actually coming from this one main speaker. So if you actually cover it, you can pretty much muffle all the sound, and it's also not nearly as loud or as clear as the one on the Moto X. So yeah. So to answer the question, can the iPhone 4 be used as a daily driver here in 2018? And especially when it's on iOS 6. And when looking at it, iOS 6, it's a firmware that came out nearly 6 years ago. So it's obviously not as in date as something like Android 7 on the Moto X, or iOS 11 on the newest iPhone, or something like that. Great things about this phone, you can go ahead and you get this great, wasn't focused, but you can get this great, skeuomorphic user interface. You get a lot of nostalgia using iOS 6, last firmware of Steve Jobs era. It's great. But the thing is, when it comes to performance, it's not as good as you would expect, especially when it comes to opening things like Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, etc. It's just really not that strong. The speed really isn't there, and especially when it comes to getting like newer versions of apps. These versions of Twitter and YouTube are very old. The Instagram version doesn't even have stories on it, so that can really that can kind of really like vary like how you sort of use this phone. So in that regard, when it comes to speed and overall application updates, I couldn't really recommend it, to be honest. But if you're really into that old design, and like really the speed, if you're able to live with the speed, if you're able to live with the outdated apps and some apps not even being supported, then in that case, I say it actually might be worth it, and you might even find yourself actually using your phone less, which could be a very good thing, obviously, because the screen's very small, the apps aren't in date, things take forever to load. So as a result, you might just want to be like, what, I don't want to use my phone, I just want to go outside and enjoy my day, which actually might be a really good benefit. But overall, for me, I was only able to keep my sim in here for about a day. I might do like a 1 week challenge later on. But as for right now, I was only able to use this phone solidly for like a day. And then after that, it was kind of like, yeah, I need to go back to my Moto X. But yeah, I might try a 1 week challenge in the future. We'll see how I feel. I'm gonna be, a little bit busy next week because school starts and everything like that. But yeah, I have to see. But as for right now, I'm probably gonna use my Moto X. I remember like putting my SIM back in here, and the first time, the phone felt way faster. The apps were far more in date. Everything just felt more modern, 2018 like. So yeah, that's my verdict on saying, whoa, focus. Saying on whether the iPhone 4 could be used as a daily driver for the Moto X.